Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Taste Radio. We're offering an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am joined by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
And I'm Brian Black. Today, we are going to talk about a segment I saw about 2 weeks ago on 60 Minutes that dealt with ballistics and stopping the bleed. So what they did is I feel like they did a fairly good job in terms of media taking an apolitical view to the subject of firearms and ballistics and, medical treatment. And I felt it was really the first segment that I've seen in a news source that really covered everything well from the perspective of not only the firearms, and they really did a good job describing the firearms. They weren't, going out of control, talking about, fully automatic ARs and stuff like that. They referred to them properly. They talked about the trauma aspects of shootings in the United States, as well as looking at shooting bullets through ballistics gelatin. So there were obviously critiques. I critique everything I see anyway. I think for the most part, that was one of the most well-rounded programs I've seen on that subject. The subject of, and it wasn't even gun control. They didn't really even talk about controlling guns. They were just giving a fairly apolitical stance on this is what firearms do, this is what they're causing, this is how you treat incidents like this. This is, they interviewed a lot of medical professionals. So I think they did a really good job. And what I wanted to do on the show, or what we wanted to do, is just kind of dissect that a little bit, talk back and forth about what we saw in the segment, and then talk about some things that we try to promote here at ITS as well, and how you can make sure your significant others and yourself are protected, and kind of what you do on a daily basis too. I mean, what was your interpretation of that?
What I had seen is basically they're doing a comparison between pistol round 9mm and then 5.56 from the AR platform, and I think it's somebody would look at it as kind of a biased approach, but I understand what they're saying, which I think is that in the past, more commonly, people have received injuries from pistol calibers versus rifle calibers. We're seeing a lot of shootings now where people are using rifles, and the ballistics difference between a hit from a pistol round and a rifle round are two totally different ballparks. And I think their message is, because the rifles are being utilized more often, you should be prepared to deal with rifle-level trauma, including having trauma kits and tourniquets and things available right then. I mean, I think it's the same mentality whether you get hit with a pistol or a rifle. You should be ready to treat that kind of trauma, and everyone should have medical kits available to them. But it was interesting to me that they started looking at like the wound cavity, and they discussed things like entry and exit wounds, which is something that in the training for trauma that I've seen is very, I don't know, it's very upfront. You think, oh, that's a small wound, because entry wounds from firearms are small. The bullet's energy isn't transferred until it's already passed through. So you'll see, oh man, that doesn't look big at all. On the back end, if there's an exit wound, it's much bigger, and that's where a lot of your trauma comes through. And it's why rounds like the 5.56 cartridge are so devastating, because of how fast they're moving.
Well, and I do think it was an interesting look into that. However, what I do think that they should have done is been a little more upfront with what kind of grain they were using.
Sure.
What the bullet weight was, that type of thing. So, were they using anyway, basically the grain, and both not only in the AR platform but also in the handgun platform too. I just think that would have given the viewer a little bit more realistic look, because I felt that them not doing that, it did give off a little bit of a bias towards what they were trying to get across, was that this is so much more lethal. And it is. I'm not disputing that. However, when you look at a wound cavity channel and you look at the comparison between a bullet, I mean, they could have used a very small grain 9mm into that ballistics gelatin versus a DRT round or something that's got the shell just completely, or the casing, the jacket completely rips apart, inside the ballistic gelatin. So I really think that should have been disclosed a little bit more. And I felt that one thing that they should have done is also compared just a typical hunting caliber rifle too.
Sure, absolutely, because that'd be totally different.
Because, well, and not only would it be totally different, you would really get a chance to see, because to me, the bias, they were trying to be upfront, and I get that, and I appreciate the way that they did that segment. However, I think a lot of people discount firearms that are used in hunting too, and I'm not saying we need to show those to somehow, devalue their role in hunting. I'm just saying it's a very popular caliber, like a 300 Win Mag or something that's a very popular hunting caliber. They are readily available. I mean, hunting rifles are used quite often in things too. I mean, I'm not saying that they are used in the mass shootings we're seeing, but I would love to look at those numbers to see how our hunting caliber rifles used in other type of violent situations.
Well, and I think if you charted ballistics from rifle rounds, 5.56 comes in towards the bottom. I mean, it's not a well-performing. We've talked about the ballistics of 5.56 in the past, and compared to 6.5 Creedmoor 308, it's not a well-performing round as far as energy when it hits and things like that. I think its big benefit is the weight, and it's a military round that was developed to carry ammunition that's not as heavy as 308 or past rounds that we've used in like the Garands and things like that. So that is a great point, because they made it out to be like the big bad round, when in reality, as far as the rifle class, it's not that large.
Yeah.
I mean, especially up to like an AK-47 7.62 round. Those are...
Yeah, and one thing that I feel like they also did when they came across with the information is that they made it seem as though a 9mm round would do less damage and you can survive from that, and that's just not true.
No.
It's not true.
Yeah.
I can shoot somebody with a 22 and they will die just as quickly from a 9mm or a 5.56. It's all about round placement and where that bullet strikes. I mean, I had a friend that had an accident with a 22 as a kid and almost died. So, I mean, I know that the 22 can be just as lethal. It just depends on, obviously, distance plays a part in that. We talked about, the bullet, the feet per second the bullet's traveling and things like that play into that too. But I felt like they were taking a stance of like the 9mm is an okay bullet because most people survive when they get hit with a 9mm. And that's like not true.
Almost like a BB gun.
Yeah, it's not true.
Yeah.
And that's why we've been really preaching trauma kits from the very beginning of the inception of ITS. I mean, I saw the need for that right away. I mean, that was one of the first 3 products we started carrying in the ITS store was trauma kits, because I saw that a lot of, I had a good buddy that was a corpsman, and I started learning from him why trauma kits were so important. I was really into medical stuff and paying attention to those type of things when I was in the Navy too. And just through that, I saw, okay, well, these traumatic incidents are happening at home. This was 2010 when we started selling these. There were the, tourniquets and a vacuum sealed trauma kit. Those things weren't really ubiquitous even in the tactical market at that time. And they're still not ubiquitous everywhere yet. I mean, they're still trying to get EMS to carry tourniquets and things like that, which some do and some don't. We have gotten to the point where at least law enforcement now is carrying their own trauma kits, and that's pretty much U.S.-wide now. I would say that's probably the adoption rate now is pretty U.S.-wide for trauma kits, and not solely relying on EMS to come save an officer's life, because I mean, people are starting to pay attention to that, and that's a good thing. And segments like this that talk about stopping the bleeding and carrying tourniquets and things like that are super important. They almost made it seem like now we have to do this. No, we've had to do it for 15 years
you guys
now.
Are just discovering this.
And it's just it's terrible that it's taken. I don't even want to say taken this long, because it's still not going to get adopted.
Right.
Many people have saw this segment and are at least looking into it now, hopefully. There's now, stop the bleed classes every year that are free for people to learn how to put on a tourniquet and, pack a wound and things like that, which are amazing.
Yeah.
But it's still not catching on like it needs to.
Right.
And I think that something that everybody should have in their car is a trauma kit.
Yeah.
And a first aid kit. I think both of those are very important. And just, I don't know, it's tough to.
Yeah, I think that the overarching thing of the segment is like because of shootings. And I don't carry a trauma kit because of shootings. I carry a trauma kit because we are bags of meat thinly bound by skin that gets punctured really easily. It doesn't have to be a bullet. It can be a tree limb. It could be a car accident. It could be anything. And the fact is that, like on a femoral bleed, you got minutes. You don't have hours and hours and hours to sit there and wait for EMS and stuff. If you get a bad enough injury that could be stopped with a tourniquet, you're the one that has to apply that, or somebody that you come across. Like as they said in that segment, we're the first responders usually, civilians that are just hanging around. You can call EMS, but you never know how long somebody's out or can even come into a situation.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, to just jump back to your femoral thing, like it's really technically seconds. Well, I wouldn't even say minutes on a femoral bleed.
Minute.
But it's just because of pressure. I mean, if you think about the human body, blood is all under pressure. And if you somehow break that pressure seal on your blood passageway, and especially in a femoral bleed, it's just going to continue to spurt out. And you can, grab a 20-ounce Dr. Pepper, stab it in the side, and just keep it under pressure in your hand. And that stream that leaks out it's not the same thing. However, it's very similar to what you're looking at for blood loss. There's only so much blood the human body has, and once it's gone, you're done. It doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's like keep the blood in the body. I've always been taught that. I've always said that when I'm referring to this type of thing, because the faster you can stop the flow of blood, the greater your chance is for survival. I'm not saying somebody's going to survive if you stop the bleeding, but the chance for survival is increased amazingly from there.
And I think that's they have lots of information back during the Civil War where if a man was gut shot, they would just pass him over because it's the nature of the injury that I think there's a lot of people that think, oh, well, they got shot, nothing we can do. But it just depends, because sometimes there is. And a lot of times it's extremity injuries. You get shot in the hand or the arm or the leg or something, and that's when tourniquets shine. Like that can save somebody, just having a tourniquet available.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be that, oh, the ballistics are getting so advanced, we need to be ready for this. We've needed to be ready for this for years. And if this is what it takes to get people to notice that, I think it's good that segments like that exist.
Well, so look at it this way. This is maybe an interesting way to spin this too, is that you talk about how, mass shootings are increasing and, the AR is being used more commonly and things like that. Well, rewind before, before Iraq and Afghanistan and, back to 2002, 2000, even pre 9/11, even right before. Yeah. So 9/11 happened. The war really kind of kicked off after that. People were going into the field. That's when, don't quote me on this, but I believe that's right when the TCCC formed, because what was happening is there started to be a study of what kind of injuries were happening in the battlefield. And they looked at those and they said, these can be preventable causes of death. Because a lot of this is happening with extremity hemorrhage, which means severe bleeding, meaning that people are bleeding out before we can save them. Tension pneumothorax, so somebody gets shot in the chest or the pleural cavity gets punctured, and now that they can't breathe, and what happens is they wind up getting essentially an embolism. Your lung pretty much collapses onto your heart. You can't, it stops your heart. That's what can happen too. And then airway obstruction was happening too. So those were like the three big leading causes of preventable death in the field. And the TCCC, the Tactical Committee on Combat Casualty Care, started really diagnosing these things and said, okay, what can we do to produce guidelines to better handle these things? How can we stop these from happening? And they, produce guidelines. We've published them almost since the very beginning that ITS started. They have updates pretty much on a yearly basis, sometimes twice a year, but they're always looking at ways to improve those guidelines, or the things that they say, okay, during care under fire, so meaning, rounds are coming at you, you're there on the field. What can you do to stabilize that casualty, get them off the X, get them stable and get them to higher echelon care so they can be saved? These are the things that we recommend. So those things have always been, in the backbone of what's in our kits to begin with. However, it took a long time for those principles to kind of start carrying over into the civilian world, both within the TCCC, which is the law enforcement side of TCCC, and that's starting to become more ubiquitous now. Hence why people are starting to carry trauma kits on the law enforcement side too. But there's still a disconnect though between first responders and the civilian world and the military world too. And a lot of people say, well, a lot of people will talk negatively about military influence on things, but that is one area where you cannot dispute that military influence on the civilian world is important.
Yeah.
Because those are lessons that have been learned over and over and over again.
They have data. Countless encounters of this kind of stuff. And they change their procedures too. One of the things that's changed in their recommendations is I think tourniquets have moved up in when you should apply a tourniquet, because there's a lot of misinformation on tourniquets out there, and a lot of people will say, oh, don't apply a tourniquet as the first thing. But then now there's new information that's coming out that's saying, yeah, you should apply a tourniquet as the first thing. Mm-hmm. That's the fastest way to stop the bleeding. It used to be that you didn't want to use hemostatics, but now it's, let's use some hemostatics to stop the bleeding. So it's always evolving and changing.
Well, the tourniquet application came from the misconception that someone was going to lose a limb or by putting on a tourniquet, and really that's, what would you rather do? Would you rather lose a limb or would you rather bleed to death?
That's always my favorite thing. Like, even if it causes the loss of a limb,
which it won't.
Ask somebody.
There have been studies done to say that it's not going to cause that.
But even if it does, it's like, hey, I could save you right now, but you're going to lose your arm. How many people wouldn't be like, yeah, go ahead, let's do this? Yeah,
and that's why modern tourniquets come with a time label, so you can write in what time it was put on.
Yeah,
because you really want to. Obviously, there's a timeline there. If you leave the tourniquet on for too long, you can risk that happening. And there's a word for that type of atrophy of your limb to where it has to be removed. And I can't think of it right now, but that's why the time label thing is so important. And to get back to the hemostatics, like that burning was being caused by one of the first products on the market, which was Quick Clot. It was a granular product that you dumped into a wound, and it would coagulate the blood by really superheating it.
It was like a controlled chemical burn.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And it was, people were getting turned off of that because of that type of injury. And the other problem is that you couldn't get it out of a wound. So you had to irrigate it, and it was kind of a nightmare to get all that Quick Clot back out. And now with the gauze that's got the kaolin impregnated in it, it's got the hemostatic baked into the gauze, so you can just pull the gauze out, once you get to higher echelon care, or you can't pull out the, higher echelon care needs to be the one to do that. But, just by including that with the tourniquet, that you've got like a hemostatic agent packed inside is big too, to let higher echelon care know that. But either way, like you said, those modern advances are happening. People are paying more attention to that. And segments like this are great. Like, to get back to the 60-minute segment, I think is a pro. We kind of picked it apart a little bit too. But at the same time, I really do think more things like this need to be shown from an apolitical point of view, to say, these are the type of things that are happening, because no one's going to refute that these things are happening more frequently. It is happening more frequently. Do I think that the AR platform is just this evil firearm? I don't. I think it's got its applications. Yes, it is a more lethal round in certain situations, but a 9mm can be just as dangerous.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, and I know that it didn't really get into the gun control aspect of the AR platform, but it mentioned how many ARs are in existence, and I just feel like people are always advocating for gun control or to remove guns from the street, or you are never going to do that.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's just a different climate.
It's futile, honestly.
Yeah, it really is.
The shooting that just took place in California, one of the most restrictive states in the United States for gun control, just had the same thing happen. So, criminals don't pay attention to laws.
No.
It's just that's what makes them criminals to begin with.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, and we continue
Laws are
to
not,
learn.
I don't think the law is where the
No,
solution
you can't
lies.
legislate the problem away. It has to be preparing yourself, because this is an instance where in this most recent shooting, we had police on the scene within 2 minutes. And TCCC principles still apply. Whether you have a long response or a short response, you can still do things to help people, because the police get there, EMS gets there. There may be other things that they're having to deal with. So you having a kit and being prepared to help people can't hurt.
Right.
It can only help in situations like that. So you should just always be ready to help. And even if you're just providing support to first responders that get there, you're just another helper in that. And yeah, it's not, I mean, you're not going to change it with a law.
I mean, in my opinion, I wish we would spend some time in school doing this kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because you want to talk about life skills.
Yeah.
You know, learning how to stop bleeding and put on a tourniquet. God, why wouldn't we be teaching that in school?
In health class, I don't need to know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Teach me how to save somebody.
I don't even remember that part. But yeah.
Stuck with me.
No, I mean, it's true though. And I get that we don't want to scare kids, but think about what they're dealing with already now. I mean, how are parents handling these kind of situations with school shootings? Like, what kind of information is getting back to the kids themselves? They're already scared to death probably of these situations.
Yeah, and you've talked about it before. Knowledge is power.
Right.
And how empowering is it to know that you could maybe help save someone's life? You can't stop a situation from happening, but how empowering would it be to know that, hey, if it does, maybe I can help?
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's one thing that the program did do really well, is it did put the emphasis on you are the first responder. These people are the first ones at the scene. Therefore, you should have something like that on you. You should be ready to help save a life. And I don't know. I just wish more people were paying attention to that kind of thing. And it's gotten way better. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. But it can get even better.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about 2010 when we started selling trauma kits to now. It's just, I mean, God, it's been close to 10 years. I mean, I guess almost 9. But at the same time, products have gotten better. Things have gotten smaller. I mean, you want to take, like, our trauma kit to begin with. I just pulled this out just to look at it. Like, this was our original blowout kit. It's huge. It's like the size of my face.
Yeah.
And, now we've got it down to
like the size of your hand.
Yeah, it's just everything's advancing in the right direction with that. Cell phones are getting bigger, but, trauma kits are getting smaller.
Right.
But, it's just easier to carry those kind of components now. And, to me, there's just not an excuse not to have something like that readily available, even if it's in your car. And a lot of people say, well, I don't have a way to carry that on me every day. Well, you do, but
put it in the glove box.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I do? I give them out as Christmas gifts. I tell people in my family, I say, here, even if you don't want to learn how to use this, I just want you to know that you have it in your car. Because if you don't know how to use it, somebody might come along that does, and it never hurts to have it. So give them out as Christmas gifts.
True story. But yeah, I think more things like this need to happen. More programs need to run on mainstream media that do a good job of at least putting out details on how to stop a bleed and why it's so important. But I think that's really the first segment I've seen, and I'm not saying that I haven't seen segments on, medical stuff and how important it is, but putting it all together with a discussion on an aspect of firearms with the ballistics, and talking about stopping the bleeding, and talking about kids carrying medical kits and things like that. It was a really well-rounded segment. I think things could have been better. They could have expanded on certain things, but as a whole, I think it's one of the best I've seen. So I do want to say that we'll put the link into the episode intel.
Yeah.
There's at least a recap video that we found from that segment that you can watch just to check it out to see what we're talking about. But, I would encourage everybody to not only have a trauma kit and a first aid kit, and I'm not just trying to pimp our products. So I don't care what you have. Yeah. Just don't buy a fake tourniquet. Like, that's my only stipulation. Don't go onto Amazon and say, oh, that tourniquet's the cheapest, so I'm going to buy that. It's not. Yeah. It's a fake bump tourniquet.
It's the cheapest.
Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing that I wish I could put out as a public service message is like, hey, Amazon, if you're listening, don't worry about other things that are for sale on your platform that may violate your rules. Like, let's look at tourniquets that are for sale on your platform that are just complete trash. People will get killed because they'll think they're prepared with a tourniquet, and they'll go to put it on and it'll break, and that's going to be even worse.
Yeah.
However, I don't know.
Get it from a reputable seller.
Yeah.
Even if it's not from us. Reputable.
Yeah, but, just not only carry something, but seek out training too. I mean, start with Red Cross. Just start learning about the principles of how to stop bleeding with pressure.
Yeah.
A lot of places now are starting to teach more about how to apply a tourniquet. It's really not that hard.
Yeah, it's way less scientific than you think.
Yeah, it's tighten until the bright red bleeding stops, and putting it as high and tight as you can, and that's really the deal on appendages, whether it's a thigh or in the upper part of an arm, high, tight, turn it until the bleeding stops.
Very simple.
Yeah, but hopefully this sheds a little bit of light on this subject for some people listening out there. I know it's a little over the board, all across the board a little bit, but I do feel like it's important to talk about. So that's the program. All right, thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have questions, use the # Gear Tasting on a social media network, and we'll find them and answer them here on the show. We've talked a lot in the past about our membership and how you can support ITS through that. By joining our crew leader membership, it allows us to give you back something in return for your dollars in support. But however, even if you can't support through that, if you don't have the funds to support our membership, we would very much at least appreciate a review. I say at least. You can leave a review. We would very much appreciate that too. Sorry about the at least thing. It sounded like you can at least do that for us.
The least you can do.
I don't want to make it seem like that.
The least you can do is listen, which is what you're doing right now.
Yeah, we very much just appreciate you listening to begin with, so thank you for that. But, if you want to support the show and you don't want to do it monetarily, a review is a great thing to do. Head over to iTunes, to Apple Podcasts, and leave us a review for the show, for the podcast. We would very much appreciate it. 5 stars on the review will allow Apple to see our show more highly rated and
A++ podcast would listen again.
Awesome seller, A++ would deal with again. So, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.